The Republican presidential primary field got two more candidates this week, with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and South Carolina Tim Scott announcing their bids. There are now officially 7 well-known declared candidates in the race, and more on the sidelines who could jump in at any moment. Nevertheless, Donald Trump, the twice impeached, criminally indicted former president who was found liable for sexual abuse, remains the clear frontrunner to win the nomination. Joining me now, Dave Aronberg, state attorney for Palm Beach County, and Reed Galen, co-founder of the Lincoln Project and an independent political strategist. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for coming to the Saturday show. Dave, starting with you because you're the Floridian here. Does Governor DeSantis stand a chance against Donald Trump? Because despite all his legal troubles, Trump has a double-digit lead over DeSantis, with DeSantis in the #2 spot in recent Quinnipiac, CNN, and Morning Consult polls.
Well, it's good to be back with you, Jonathan. I think his chances are very slim because, he's running as Trump without the drama. And if this were a one-on-one race with Trump, then, yeah, I think he'd have a shot. But this is turning out to be 2016 all over again. How are 10 or 12 non-Trump candidates going to beat a guy with a guaranteed 35% of the base in a winner-take-all primary? And yeah, I know that DeSantis has raised an incredible amount of money, but so did Jeb Bush. Remember shock and awe? Well, where did that fundraising get him? It got him retirement. That's where it got him. And, if the smart money really thought that Ron DeSantis could take down Trump, then Tim Scott and Chris Christie and possibly Glenn Youngkin and Chris Sununu, they wouldn't be chomping at the bit to get in the race. And his latest stumbles, whether it's the Twitter debacle or his 6-week abortion ban or his attacks on Mickey Mouse, that ain't helping him.
Reed, a couple weeks ago, another Floridian was on this show, David Jolly, the former congressman. And, he sort of rocked my world. To pick up on what Dave was talking about, 10 to 12 Republicans, vying for the nomination and thereby allowing Trump to slide on through and win the nomination again a la 2016. But David Jolly said, you know what? The more the merrier, because we, meaning the Republican Party, needs to let that happen, needs to go down in a ball of flames in order to get past Donald Trump. Do you agree with that?
I think I do agree with David on that. But I think also here's the other part, which is the more the merrier, also because we need to make sure that Donald Trump does not have a clear and easy path. At some point, Jonathan, some of these candidates are going to say, why should I be president? Because Donald Trump's presidency was a disaster. He should never be president again. The 2020 election wasn't stolen. And now we need to move on. And if we don't move on, then, yeah, the snake is going to eat its own tail and the Republican Party will crash and burn. But that being said, Jonathan, it's a very divided country, as we know that. But I would say this is whether or not it was 1-on-1 or 12-on-1, I think that Trump is still likely the nominee. But as many roadblocks and as much crazy as we can extract out of him between now and, let's say, Iowa, the better for the country.
Well, let's keep talking about crazy, Dave, because generally speaking, should saying you're going to pardon people who tried to overturn a free and fair election be disqualifying for public office? You've got Donald Trump who says, yeah, I'll pardon them. You've got Governor DeSantis saying, yeah, I'll pardon them.
Yeah, this is a MAGA arms race, and they're just making themselves so unelectable in the general election. But, they think this is going to be the way they win by targeting the MAGA base, which it's popular to think of these January 6th insurrectionists as heroes. It's crazy. Jonathan, DeSantis needs to be careful because his ultra right-wing politics he's putting on is making him less popular amongst the non-Trump voters, I think, that he needs to count on. Look, in Florida, 75% of Floridians oppose his 6-week abortion ban. Large majorities oppose his book bans and his war on Mickey Mouse. And, this is turning off a lot of people. And here's proof. In Jacksonville, the largest city in the country where the mayor was a Republican, that mayor, who is a former chair of the Republican Party and was term limited, is now being replaced by a Democrat. And DeSantis endorsed the Republicans. So I think some of the stuff's working against him.
That is an excellent point. So, Reed, let's talk about the other person who announced their candidacy this week, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. Is he actually the one to watch?
I think that Senator Scott is interesting in that he has what was thought to have really a positive message. But again, I think for any of these candidates, until and unless they are willing to say, I should be the nominee because I believe that the Republican Party is going in the wrong direction and we need it to look forward, I think that it's going to be hard for any of them. And I think that Senator Scott has to ask himself whether or not, and all these candidates, frankly, Jonathan, have to ask themselves whether or not they have the stomach for this fight. Going after Donald Trump, right? This is going after Godzilla and pterodactyls and every crazy orange monster wrapped into one. And I don't think any of them really understand what they're in for yet. And I haven't seen, maybe DeSantis really has taken a shot here or there, but none of them have done what they need to do, which is if you're going to beat this guy, believe we know this personally, you have to stay in his face day in and day out, never let him off the mat. And so far, they're sort of pretending like he's not even in the race.
Well, Governor DeSantis, gave a good go of it on a radio show yesterday. What I'm wondering, to pick up on your point, Reed, is whether Governor DeSantis or any of these folks, when standing on the stage, on the debate stage in August with Donald Trump, will they have the guts to talk all the smack they're talking in ads and campaign rallies with Godzilla and the pterodactyls and whatever monsters you can think of, standing right there waiting to breathe fire on them?
No. And here's the other part, too, is you can't plan for it because Trump doesn't know what he's going to say 15 seconds before he says it. So it's an impossible thing to plan for.
What do you think, Reed? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Dave.
Oh, well, about DeSantis on the debate stage?
Yeah.
Look, when DeSantis went up for his governor's reelection, and yes, he won the race by 19 points, but there was only one debate. It was up against Charlie Crist, who didn't excite a lot of the voters. But there is no one who believed that DeSantis won that debate. Charlie Crist ate his lunch in that debate. DeSantis had a tough time answering the question of whether he would finish his term or whether he would run for president. And so there are a lot of people thinking he's not ready for prime time. I mean, he's got a lot of money, so he's got to be taken seriously. But he has not been tested on a national stage yet. And those national bright lights are very bright.
And real quickly, Reed, we know that CNN has 2 more town halls planned, one with Nikki Haley, who has already announced her race for president,
right,
but also one with former Vice President Mike Pence. Should we take that as a sign, real fast, that he's about to officially join the race?
I would think so. And as I've said before, Jonathan, he's the only one that makes any sense to me about running against Trump because Trump actually tried to kill him.